1985. I was a command spotter working out of Revelstoke. We were using a Bell Long Ranger. We used to be two-man team, and then the government got in and figured it was safer to have three-person initial attack crews. Anyways, that morning, they did a power check on the helicopter and everything was above normal. And the fire call came in. I was in the van getting the crew ready, and my sister and mother popped in for a surprise visit. With that, the boss said, "Hey, I'll take your seat." Fine. 45 minutes later, the helicopter crashed, killing all on board. The crater was 11 feet deep and 36 feet wide. In the inquiry, it was discovered that that particular helicopter was the 29th to go down in civilian life due to an oil seal that leaked. One of the questions that was asked of me was, in flight, if a door becomes ajar, how far can you open it? And we would actually fly around without doors. And that was actually a difficult question to ask. And I said, why? He said, well, the person in the co-pilot seat, that's where the command spotter sits, actually jumped out of the helicopter. And what they put together was the pilot tried to pull off an auto-rotation, which is a descent that helicopters do without power, changing the attitude of the blades to build RPM. And what they figured is the onboard fire in the cabin, everybody was disorientated. And when he tried to, and basically they were inverted, and the fellow opened the door and went through the blades. Then the helicopter landed on. It's very dangerous, and would I want to do it nowadays with the way the climate is, the fire behavior? I don't think so. As for these firefighters, well, what they're dealing with, it's so unbelievable. They're unstoppable. Even with backburning, you're still dealing with dynamite and wind change. If you can pull a good backburn off to control the fire, yeah, you have a chance. Some of these fires, it'll take Mother Nature in the winter to put them out.
It's a gallon a minute. Pretty well what we burn here. There'll be fire there that'll burn next year. It goes underground, burns in roots. I mean, it can burn into the next year. The only way we really get a handle on them is when it starts raining. You need a weather change. You know, the guy, I always say the guy that starts it usually is the guy that puts it out, eh? Yeah, the big guy, whatever, not Santa Claus. In the end, you know, you do what you can with what you have. Eh?
They're the grandfathers. They will live a long, long time. They will create structure. They will create shelter. They will live hundreds of years. Even when they're old and broken, like it's shelter wood, it's nesting ground, it's also a node for the mycelium network and all that. It creates an environment, creates a moisture load, and it creates a space that even in their decline, even in their death, they serve a purpose for the rebirth of the new stand. There's a general consensus as the changing of the guard happens, as more young folk get into it. We all kind of have this idea. We know this generation of forestry, a lot of what our job is just realizing what was done wrong in the past and trying to fix the sins of our forefathers. Honestly, I was a burned out 18-year-old and my dad sent me north to my great uncle to make me eat dirt and become a man. And I just never changed. Because I love it out there. It's freedom, man. And you feel a connection to the landscape. You just have to actually just stop what you're doing, stop thinking, take in everything around you. Take in the way the wind whistles through the trees. Take in the way the dirt feels. You look at the stand, you see what's growing up, what's underneath. You can kind of tell by different indicator species kind of what the moisture load is there. You look at your aspect, you look at the rock content, you look where the river is, look where the drainages are. You can see little telltale signs of maybe different kinds of pest infestations, maybe a fungal growth, something like that, root rot, pine beetle. And then you start letting your brain tick away at everything you're observing. You just listen. You just tune into the whole thing.
In the beginning, people lived in a world without structure. From mountainsides to stream banks, the soil was eroding and there was no shade to rest in. This is why the people decided to build the forest.
So it's been about 4 years that I've been planting into this particular fire here. It would take centuries to sort of reforest at the rate that we're able to do it at the moment. I think we need to change our focus from replanting for monetary gains and start replanting with the focus of habitat restoration and ecological restoration, putting a valuable, diverse ecosystem back rather than crop. You know, you have these massive swaths of land killed off by mountain pine beetle. And then what do we go and do? We put massive amounts of pine back in there again. It's like, this is the problem in the first place. You can't just have one tree, because if you have one pest that feeds off of one tree and your entire landscape is dominated by one tree species, it's all gonna disappear again. And once a fire starts in that sort of forest that's beetle killed, it is horrifyingly tough to stop. You know, fires are a natural cycle of forests that clean up. You know, the fire is the caretaker of the underbrush. And the issue now is that when you don't have small little cleanup fires, you have these monsters that just sanitize and sterilize the landscape. You know, and they'll say that it's not monoculture because there's like 20% spruce in there. It's like, yeah, but it's still 80% pine. And the mixedwood forests of this area, for example, they need aspen and birch and alder and all these different things. And obviously one of the big things that was used for ages to get rid of deciduous was spraying glyphosate. And there is hundreds of thousands of hectares of land in BC being sprayed with glyphosate all the time in order to suppress deciduous. But you know, you're suppressing aspen and poplar and deciduous trees, but you're also suppressing berries and all the little shrubs and stuff that grows and feeds a lot of the wildlife. People kind of want to spit on the resource extraction that we have in this country, but we live in a place that gets to -40, and you have a house that's warm and it's built out of 2x4s, and people just need to kind of see places that are starved for natural resources and see how difficult it is to make stuff happen and how much more expensive it is. It bothers me that we live in a world of the need for exponential growth, because there's a very real cost to it, and you know, you just have to drive out here and see it.
This is going to be run just like any other incident.
Once the forest was built, the people were happy. But all of the big trees would need more carbon dioxide to breathe, and a lot of it. So to save the trees, the people invented fire.
I'm the fire keeper. So I'm here at BC Wildfire learning how to manage the fire. And because our people, as First Nations, we want to see fire getting put back on the land. One thing we're all learning together is how we can manage fire. We know we can't control it, but we could try to learn to manage it. One way is to thin the forest, manage the forest first, and we learn to manage fire. As First Nations, we used to do this seasonally, based on what grew in the area. Like a mule deer winter range, we would burn that in the fall, because then we know the snow and the rain's coming, that it won't burn all winter. And then it thins the forest, creating vegetation for the wildlife that are in that area. And at the same time, it's bringing berries and fruit for our future. I was honored to be given that task, and to be given the opportunity through BC Wildfire to learn through government ways of managing fire, and then returning home and putting that back on the land. It is very important because I worked in a forestry background for alkali resource management for 12 years, and seeing the forests now, it's pretty scary, and we need to do something now to prevent any major fires from happening in the future, and not see the fires that we've all survived in the last 5-6 years.
We created a time bomb, and really, I think it was around 96 on. If you look at the graph, you can see the intensity of the wildfires increasing, and now we're at the breaking point, and we should have started this work a long time ago, but at least we're starting now. These stands would have had fire every 2 to 15 years. The elders talk about being able to ride a horse and wagon from Williams Lake to Alkali anywhere without a trail. So it was a lot more open forest. You know, it had that rejuvenating fire going through. I fought fire 2015. I was on the Puncie. In 2017, I was evacuated from Williams Lake twice. And the night that it was evacuated, I stayed at my father-in-law's, and family had left, and you could see the glow coming up the river valley. And I set my alarm for every 2 hours to get up and look to see if I should be getting out of Dodge. And there was a few of us that were like that. The next day, nothing happened because you were trying to figure out, who was left in town, who could do what. But it was an experience, but we created it, and I know we feel like we're doing proper forest management, but with these events, we've learned a lot, and we know that treatments like this need to occur.
The forest and the fires lived in harmony for a long time, but eventually the people started noticing that the fires were getting bigger, and this made the temperature warmer. So to save the trees once again, the people would pick fights with fire. This is how they became known as firefighters.
It's just kind of coming to fruition now. I think it's not like a switch was flipped a couple of years ago and suddenly it's getting a lot worse. It's this thing that's been building for a really long time. We're just not experiencing the entirety of the conversation around it. And I kind of partially feel like that's on purpose, and that makes me distrustful.
Yeah, there was this whole history of tending to the landscape in a way. I think the sort of leave everything alone that, like, the national parks want us to do, just like, leave it in its pristine state, the forest. It's like, well, that's not how it's been. Like, yeah, the landscape was cultivated and taken care of by Indigenous peoples, and it's kind of leaving it alone is actually like a problem. It's not the way it has been taken care of in the past.
Like fire management, the Smokey Bear campaign, and America's protocol for stopping every fire is actually like a colonial practice that kind of flew in the face of tens of thousands of years of tended landscape in North America. It's supposed to burn. Like, it's supposed to happen. It's not this like evil accident or like this accident that could have been prevented. That the planet is actually designed to burn. Like, the planet likes fire, and that's how many plants and many trees succeed.
Fire isn't bad, and it's not sad. And like, also, like, how does the forest feel about a fire? Like, maybe the forest likes it, or like it's like what the forest wants. I think there is such a like anthropomorphizing of like the forest and the landscape, and somebody's house burning down, of course, is devastating. Like, I can't imagine how that feels. You have to hold two contradictory things at once, which is like, it is a tragedy and it is natural, But prescribed burning is something that's going to have to happen at a much larger scale. So, like, fire has to come back onto the landscape. That's like one of the solutions.
It becomes a sort of container for a lot of emotional states that we in the West have grown really uncomfortable with.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Like loss, death, grief, all of these things that are sort of like hidden away from us in a sort of Western cultural experience, right? Like, we see all of these things as sort of bad emotional states, things to suppress, things to not allow ourselves to feel in order to still feel like we're in control. And Wildfire somehow opens up all of these doors to these, like, thinking about subjects that are really uncomfortable for people in the West to face. We are incapable of finding a solution, but we are capable of listening, and listening to more perspectives than the dominant mode is really, it feels like, the only thing that's going to break the cycle.
Eventually, the people in the fire stopped fighting. The people put the trees back where they came from, and for a while, they stopped tending to the forest.
The stand is still what we consider an overdense conifer stand.
So females can only give birth inside dens. It's the only possible place. And that is the importance of conserving these dens, is that we need these dens as basically nurseries in order to have sustainable black bear populations. And doing this kind of thing is sort of a short-term stopgap solution to fill the time period until we allowed new trees to grow large enough to become dens.
So the reason why we're able to grow cedars on this island is because we plant them.
We can build ourselves an empire here on these islands, you know, the grandest that the world's ever seen. The reality that we have basically removed all the logs and timber from these islands over the past 100 years is really a huge event. And I guess I feel like you get used to it. You get desensitized to it until this. Just like, this is normal, right? Like clear cut's normal. We all grew up in clear cuts. And yeah, but if you look beyond that and see, well, where did it all go? You know, what happened to it? Why? And was there anything better we could be doing? So that's the biggest thing I see when I see clear cuts is, yeah, what could have potentially come of that? We have approximately 30 large year-round Haida villages that are no longer occupied due to smallpox from 1862, but we also carry within us that responsibility to rebuild those villages. Right now it seems like it's just, how do we get the logs from here to the barge? That's the biggest challenge. And so I'd like to see us go further than that.
In the end, the forest recognized the fire as the lungs of the trees. The fire thanked the people for all their efforts in making the world burn. And the people finally realized that what is well planted cannot be uprooted. This is how the people learned to see the forest for the fires.